What's up, everyone? I'm actually really sad today. Your boy got ghosted.
Oh man, can you guys relate as a photographer or videographer trying to reach out to a potential client or a brand reaches out to you and then you get ghosted? We're going to unpack those things in this episode. Ed, what do you think?
Psych, I ain't even sad about getting ghosted because like Paul just said, we're about to go over some fire tips on how we overcome this struggle.
Yeah.
So let's roll intro music, baby.
Bro, being ghosted sucks. And you and me both know the power of social media with leads, like lead generation, especially when you're trying to build that client roster. What do you think, what do you think the first thing that comes to mind is when you think of getting ghosted? Because I know that there's been photographers and videographers that listen actively to the MIDCONVO podcast and they'll reach out to us saying, hey, what do you do when you're in conversation with a brand or you're trying to reach out to a brand and they leave you on red?
Yeah, you already know. You get that Instagram where it says seen and you're like,
Oh.
dang, they didn't even hit me back with a response though.
That's tough.
Honestly, I feel like this is a great topic because like you just said, there's a lot of creatives that listen to this podcast. A common thing that we always both see is people have great skills, great talent, but then they just get ghosted. Like clients just don't respond back to them when they inquire. So we wanted to cover three things that happen when getting, like how to avoid getting ghosted basically.
And then we're also going to provide maybe some solutions for how you can overcome those things. And then some overarching things that we feel like will improve your overall process when bringing on clients.
Yep. We've broken it down into three sections: DMs, pricing, and presentation. So let's go into DMs a little bit, right? Well, Paul, share some experience on getting ghosted in the DMs and why that happens. A lot of people, everyone can relate to hitting up a brand on Instagram and then just crickets, like no response.
Yeah. So I've literally gotten ghosted probably hundreds of times from brands and people over Instagram, and that's okay. But one thing that I've learned in that is Instagram is always changing, and also there's a lot of spam and noise on social media. So when you're reaching out to a brand over DM in a cold way or a way of outreach that's cold and not a warm lead, you got to do something that stands out, right? Because there's always going to be someone that's louder than you are or is easier to find online, if you will. So I think when it comes to rolling into a brand's DM, first thing that comes to mind is don't use a template email. Do something that's customized to them as a company. Otherwise, it's going to show up in their spam. And then also think of something that's going to like capture their attention and be memorable. For me, Ed knows this, I love sending voice memos. I already know that these brands that I'm reaching out to and that I have reached out to are getting so many DMs, customer complaints, photographers that are doing the same thing that I'm doing. So what can you do to stand out against the noise?
Yeah. Honestly, just quick side note, I just got to say, if you guys don't know this, Paul sends the best voice memos. If I could save all of Paul's voice memos this man has texted me, it would be amazing, like as a sound effect.
Yeah. I'll give you a quick example for the pod here. There was a brand 2 years ago that I reached out to. They have a fitness product that's at Target, and I bought the product and I'm like, all right, what am I going to do to stand out? I literally shot a selfie video of me holding the product and I'm like, hey, I just got back from Target. I can't tell you how nice it is that your water bottle does X, Y, and Z because your competitors don't. I'm based out of Minnesota. I'd love to work with you. I'm a health, wellness, and fitness photographer. I can shoot photo, I can shoot video. Let's hop on a call. I sent that video to them in a DM. I got a message back immediately with their marketing contact, and then I brought it to email and we hopped on a Zoom call. So I don't think I would have gotten that response if I would have just sent them a template email like, hey, my name is Paul, based out of Minnesota. I just found you guys on Instagram and your product looks nice. Can you hop on a call? Here's my rates. I would have gotten ghosted.
Dude, that is definitely not the way to do it. And honestly, just to share a little of insight on the back end too, like when I used to work at my last job, when I had a full-time job, one of my responsibilities was vetting some of the influencer or like some of the inquiries we get in the DMs of this account of the company I worked at. And just being on the other end of that, I can seriously tell you from experience, you don't treat a DM the same as you would treat an email. Like you look through DMs and you look at what they're asking for. There's just so much noise on Instagram, as Paul mentioned. It's very easy for a brand just to glance for 2 seconds at your DM that you carefully crafted and then just like throw it into the, delete box, So it's really vital that you do something to stand out, like Paul mentioned. So, doing a voice memo or a video, those are great things.
Ed, when you were in that position, managing that brand's marketing, essentially, what was the first thing that you would do if you got a DM from a photographer, videographer that rolled into the DMs? Would you look at their Instagram profile?
Oh, for sure. That's the first thing I would do. But honestly, a lot of times though, I'll actually read the first sentence or two of their. So I've seen so many emails, dude. I've been on the receiving end, and I've been on the end to like send out emails as well to brands. And I can tell you right off the bat, all it takes is to read the first 2 sentences to see if it's a template. I know if it's a template after the first 2 sentences. And if I got a templated DM or a templated email from a creator, I would immediately trash it. I don't care how talented they are, because if they shotgunned it to 10 other people, realistically, they're probably not that interested in working with us. They just want to make money. So making it not so templatey, which we'll go into a little bit later on the presentation topic. But yeah, I honestly think checking their account is crucial. But if you don't word it properly, it'll also get scrapped, and then they'll ghost you.
100%. I think one thing I want to point out in response to your question there, or my question to you is, guys, you might be getting ghosted because you have a weak portfolio on your Instagram. So it's like, as a photographer, videographer, when we talk about resumes and like portfolio, it's your Instagram and then it's your website for the most part.
True.
So what do the photos look like on your website? Do they speak to the brand that you're DMing? And then also your positioning. But if I said that most photographers that reach out to me that say, hey, I keep getting ghosted, what do I do? I'm like, I looked at your Instagram, your positioning sucks. Hate to say it, but like your Instagram bio says you love soccer. It says that you're based out of whatever city you're located in. It has nothing about the value that you can offer to brands in that space. So it's like, how do you fine tune your portfolio? How do you fine tune your positioning or your messaging before reaching out to these brands that you want to work with? It's crucial.
It is. No brand wants to work with a creator with a whack feed, guys. We've talked about this. You don't want that whack Instagram feed, all right? Ain't gonna get you nowhere.
I'll be honest. I gotta just call it a horror story for when I rolled into the DMs once. There was a year where I worked with probably one too many gyms. This was pre-COVID, obviously, and the template. Let's just say I forgot to change the name of the decision maker for one gym.
I've done this
and
before.
I was reaching out to a few different gyms in the same area, same city, Minneapolis.
Oh no.
And I remember addressing a DM to the decision maker for the marketing department of one gym, and I accidentally sent it to their competitor gym. And the person responded saying, "Hey, thanks for the message. I think you meant to send this to the other gym."
Oh heck no, dude. That's awkward.
Man, and I'm like, yeah, you're totally right. And to be honest, like, I'm kind of embarrassed, right?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. But hey, we're all guilty of it. I've used templates. I still sometimes use templates, depending on what it's for. But for the most part, you don't want to go that route because, like Paul said, one, there's actually the chance of making the mistake like that where you forget to change a specific detail in the template. It's happened. I'm sure it's happened to a lot of people who are listening to the podcast right now before. But yeah, so I think DMs, we went into a little bit of like how people are getting ghosted and why you might be getting ghosted in the DMs. But let's go into pricing a bit, because this is the whole, just to preface too, me and Paul were talking off the mic. Everything we're talking about in this episode today is to help you guys perfect the onboarding process. Like DMs, calls, pitches, everything this is all included in an onboarding process. Because if you can perfect your onboarding process, you should have no problems with getting clients, which then in turn means getting business and getting paid. So it's very crucial that you nail everything we talk about in this episode. And the next thing after DMs we want to talk about is pricing. So how can you brush up on this front, Paul, if you want to not get ghosted?
Yeah. I think that a huge issue that a lot of people in the freelance creative space run into when it comes to just coming in contact with a potential client, especially a potential client, is they get so excited and so caught up in like, the butterflies that they say a price right away, right? And as a brand, as a company, the brand's thinking, how are you going to tell us the price without understanding our needs and what we need? So I've said this many times if you've been following me on Instagram, do not be the photographer, videographer that prescribes before you diagnose. And that's why I feel like all day you can, throw out pricing, but the way that you're going to really wow a potential client is when you customize it to their needs and you're able to provide that solution to their problems, right? I think it's that simple. It's not like the wedding industry where you can have the gold, the bronze, and the platinum package on your website. I do think, though, if you're working with entrepreneurs, I think there's one, there's a time where you can have the packages out. And it's if you're working with like portraits or, if you're shooting headshots for entrepreneurs, I think that's fine. But you might be getting ghosted because you're saying pricing too early in your onboarding process.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times early on a brand would ask me, they would actually prompt me, they would say like, how much do you charge? And then I spit out a number and then crickets, no response after that.
Ghosted.
So you might have got the initial reaction from them like, oh, this creator's work is good. The portfolio checks out. Everything is good. They'll say, yeah, we would love to work with you. What are your rates? I mean, it's very common for a brand to ask that. Then you reveal it. Then they don't hit you back up. Either the rate was too high or the structure didn't make sense. Oftentimes when a brand doesn't respond to a rate that you sent them, it's not always because it was too expensive. Sometimes it's just because it made no sense. Like, how did you come up with $5,000? And they don't have the patience, nor do they have the time to ask you, okay, how do you come up with 5K? What does that include? And they'll like go into all the details. So like Paul said, you have to first diagnose what they need so that you can properly give them a rate. I do want to say though, on that note, if you're a photographer, videographer, like it's okay to have a day rate. Everything we're talking about right now is getting clients to work with you and you kind of walk them through the process of A through Z. Everything from a discovery call all the way to like post-production. And then obviously you have to give a rate that's very specific to the brand. But let's say you get hit up by an agency who's like, hey, we just need someone to come shoot on set for like a day. It's okay to have a day rate then for things like that. You don't always have to charge differently for those situations. But I think, well, Paul, maybe you can agree to this, but what we're talking about today is landing brands that can ultimately maybe lead to retainer work, or you're kind of more of a content partner for this brand, not like a one-off day rate type of gig.
100%. I think too, it's like the pricing should come after you ask the right questions and figure out what the project looks like. The project scope. I think it's fine to have a starting at price, but you shouldn't bring that up at the first point of contact, like the first time speaking with that brand. Unless you're super busy and you're capped and you don't have much capacity, go for it. Say, hey, my starting at price is this. Just want to give you a heads up. If that sounds good, we can hop on a call. That's fine. But I think what happens is there's fixed packages and fixed pricing that's going out in the DMs and over emails to clients that roll in your inbox. And then also the worst is I've done this before, so that's why I know that some of you guys might be doing this, but reaching out to brands that you feel like you can add value to that have never heard your name before and saying what your pricing is right off the bat. That's a terrible thing to do. And if anything, you're going to get ghosted time and time again until you figure out how to bring in the right questions and make it an incredible customized experience before saying, hey, this is the price and I've justified it and all the things that I've shared with you already. It's much easier to do it that way than by just literally throwing a price out of nowhere to them. You can ask them for their budget. That's helpful. But yeah, I think that the reason why we're talking about this is because a lot of you need to just relax and sit back, ask the right questions, have a normal conversation, listen, do the discovery call, and then talk about pricing.
Yeah. It's honestly kind of a dance, early on, especially when all the things we're talking about today is especially true if you're first starting out. You know, if you've built some rapport, you have a fire portfolio, you've worked with a lot of well-known brands, it is a lot easier to not get ghosted just because you just have a portfolio that your work kind of speaks for itself. But I would, you know, probably bet that a lot of people listening to this podcast are people who are trying to grow their business, maybe don't have all the work that they would like to have accomplished under their belt. So everything that we're talking about is so vital because it's all in your business skills. If you don't, because your portfolio may not be up to par yet, so then it has to be heavy on the business side. And so for me, if you don't actually focus on these elements and you don't have a good portfolio, you will struggle really hard to make it as a freelance creative. So you need to have one or the other. You know, I've always kind of thought of it as a scale. When you're first starting out, you may not have that much skill, but if you have a lot of business knowledge, you can succeed. Or you're just super talented. You're like a one-off. You're just very talented and you have really low business knowledge, but you just are like so talented that people cannot avoid being in love with your work, then you could still succeed. But if you have both, you're empty on both sides, like you're not super, super talented quite yet, and you have no business skills, that's where you will struggle. So if you are listening to this right now and you feel like, oh, dang, that's me. Like I struggle with business and I feel like my portfolio isn't up there yet. It's
keep
vital
listening to the podcast.
Keep listening to MIDCONVO because we're dropping gems out here. But I feel like it's very vital because early on when I was first starting out, a little bit about my own experience, it felt like such a dance in the beginning, you know, like I felt like one little word that I said wrong, the client would like disappear, or one little portfolio, one thing in the email that I didn't word properly. And they're like, wow, maybe I should have said this. Maybe I should have said that. You get very in your own head. And so if you just understand the fundamentals, it'll be so much better.
That's so good. I think, Ed, you just brought up something that I want to point out. If you get ghosted, what if I told you that might be a blessing in disguise? It might just not be a good fit, right? If you do all the things and it's working for some clients, but you run into clients where you're like, they're not responding. Well, guess what? You probably, listen, you got to follow your gut feeling. And also you need to know that there's always going to be business that comes and goes. And it might be a blessing in disguise that you just dodged a bullet for a potential business relationship that just wasn't going to be it, that was going to have pricing tension throughout the entire relationship. So I often get ghosted sometimes by people because I want to hop on a Zoom call and they're like, oh, we don't have time for a Zoom call. Well, I'm like, that's totally fine. We're probably not a good fit for each other because I want to better understand the strategy behind the content before we just start shooting, right? Stick to your guns and make sure that you're not getting discouraged if you're getting ghosted time and time again. But you need to make sure that you're following these things that we're talking about in this conversation because they are crucial in making sure that you don't get ghosted.
Yeah. Let's go into the third thing now. So we went over DMs, how to do that properly and just what to avoid. We talked about pricing and what can happen if you reveal your pricing too early and just overall just the pricing and the importance of it. Let's go into presentation. I feel like this is where a lot of people struggle and why they get ghosted as well. So what has been your experience, Paul, with like presentation and how you pitch to brands so that they still are interested even after the initial contact?
Yeah. Well, first thing that comes to mind is you got to put your best foot forward. First impressions are everything. And then also I think a lot of photographers and videographers out there trying to get new business are trying to just make quick transactions. And guess what?
Yep.
Everybody's yearning for long-term relationships. If you're trying to make a quick buck, you should probably do senior photos. Hate to say it, but like if you're working with brands and like if you're trying to build your brand as a commercial photographer or videographer, the power of presentation is everything. When me and Ed connected for the first time a little over a year ago, one thing that I feel like I was really blown away by with your brand, Ed, is looking at your Instagram feed. I'm like, it's so cohesive. The presentation's there. But then as we talked about what your proposals and your decks look like on the back end, they're dialed. Like everything is so clean and consistent that I know for a fact that brands will hire you sometimes because they're like, this guy's presentation for his own brand is strong. We're confident that he's going to be able to bring that for our company. So it's like I don't think there's ever been a brand or decision maker that said, hey, we're not going to work with that guy because his presentation's too good. No.
That's true. That's true. Honestly, well, first off, thank you. Thank you for the gas.
I got
Paul.
you, man. Yes.
Paul, I think me and Paul, it's funny because, quick side note, we love obviously creative business talk and shooting content, but low key, me and Paul, we be geeking out about some design sometimes. I feel like in a different life, me and Paul would be like graphic designers, or like we're super geeky about like typography and all that stuff. But yeah, I think early on in my career as well, as Paul mentioned, I focused a lot on the pitch decks and the presentation because, as I just mentioned a couple minutes ago, I didn't have the skill sets yet. Like I wasn't shooting on a cinema camera yet. I knew my content wasn't at the quality of some of the people around me and what they were charging. So I tried to make up for it by having clean pitch decks, clean typography. Those are the things that some of the brands I know are focused on that I could have delivered on that front. And I feel like sometimes it gave me a little bit of an edge versus a creator who's reaching out with a good video, but then the presentation is just absolute garbage, right? Like no good email structure, no good email etiquette, no clean typography. They don't even have a logo. It's just like an Instagram portfolio. All these things make up a good presentation. Because put yourself in the shoes of the brand, right? Like imagine someone approaching you talking about how to brand your product, but then they don't even know how to brand their own business.
Come on. It's
good. Like, come on, how are they going to help you? So yeah, presentation is huge. And I wanted to revisit this from earlier, but the presentation also goes in with the template, right? Like it's okay to have templates with pitch decks and email. Even like the copy that you use in your email can have somewhat of a template. But it's vital that you include at least one or two things that are very unique and super specific to that brand. Paul, I feel like you do this often, right? Like when you reach out to a brand, like what do you dissect from their own, what they're currently doing to inject into your pitch or into your presentation to be like, oh wow, Paul actually looked at our business before he reached out?
Oh, there's a list of things. Colors, who's their target consumer. Shout out to my ads people, consumer profiles. Hey. I look at like who they're trying to speak to. Is there a product that they're trying to push that's like a top seller? Literally all the things, like how do they even, what does their website look like? How did they lay out their website? Because then when I bring it into my proposal or even my production guides, I make sure that it looks extremely clean, and also they open it and they're like, this looks like something that we would create in-house, like our design team would create. And Ed, I think it comes from me and you rubbing shoulders over the years with graphic designers or people that are in the space that are really into like, typography, but also motion graphics. And I want to ask you quick, Ed, when we talk about presentation, what are some of the ways that you present yourself, whether it's the collateral or whatever you're sending them in emails? I think some people might be like, all right, what does Ed do and what does Paul do? Do you want to touch on for a second what you do?
Yeah. So are you talking about like the initial touch base or just like
I'm just talking in general?
In general.
Yeah. Is there any templates that you have? Do you have a proposal template? Do you have a production guide? Is there like a go-to thing that you bring into your process that's maybe like customized that just goes to show like the full, the full picture?
I think for me, it's very dependent on how much budget I think this client is going to be. Maybe we both can relate to this, but like if it's a quick day shoot that's like, doesn't require that much explanation, I usually won't put together a proposal just because I feel like it's not necessary. But if I feel like the project is going to be in the 5 figures or, between like $10,000 or $30,000, then I will put together a proposal because I want to land the client, obviously. And if they are putting a lot of money up and they've revealed that budget number to me, I got to have some skin in the game and put in some work on the front end before they actually sign off on their proposal. So I do have some templates that I use for proposals that I will customize, as Paul mentioned, like the color. I'll look up what colors the brand has and I'll put that in the color into the presentation or pitch deck, because if the brand is generally monochromatic with lots of blacks, grays, and whites, you don't want to send a proposal that you've sent previously that's like baby blue and pink and white. Like just because it fits your brand doesn't mean it's going to fit their brand. So you want to make sure you fit the proposal to their brand. And then I think once I get past that point, one thing that I do on the presentation front that I think is not necessarily unique, but works really well is I'll create a specific Notion page for the project. So it's a Notion page that I create that has like, it's interactive, right? So it's not like a PDF. I build out the page in Notion, send them the link, and it's a drop down toggle menu. So they can see project deliverables, project timeline, project budget. And I'll also update this basically Notion page as the project goes on. So if I find locations or if I find potential talent, I'll let the client know in an email, be like, hey, I just updated the Notion page with potential talents. Can you go in and make your selects?
Nice.
These are the kind of things that I feel like make the presentation so much better for a client instead of having an email thread with 50 emails going back and forth with like JPEGs and PDFs and whatnot. So it's like every time I put together presentations for clients, whether that's no matter where it is in the production pipeline, I always ask, how can I make this process, how can I make this experience for the client memorable? How can I make it more immersive? Because if it's memorable, they're going to want to come back. If it's just some basic thing like a PDF, like here you go, a lot of people do that already, right? They're not going to remember me because they've probably worked with a ton of other creators before in the past. So yeah, that's a little speed round of a few things that I do. What do you do on, I know your pitch decks are fire as well. I've seen some of Paul's pitch decks.
They're fun.
And they're freaking nice, dude. But what are some things you do specifically on them or outside of just the pitch decks?
Yeah, I kind of want to break it down like you did, where it's like you have the one-offs that are kind of like a quick half day or day rate. And then I have shoots that are maybe a little bit more bigger, where there's more people involved. But I think just in general, like if you lack presentation, you're going to get ghosted because there's a lot of photographers and videographers out there and agencies that are competing for work. And because of how visual our world is now with digital media, decision makers love it when there's creative ways of getting in contact with them. It's super awesome. And I can't tell you, like, I can tell you right now that some of my friends that are brand directors and brand managers at companies, they go after the resumes or portfolios or the emails or the DMs that have that creative touch to it. And for me, it starts with the front end. Like I said earlier, like a customized DM, if I'm reaching out to them. I've sent literally emails before with the subject line, I shot a video for you. The brand opens up the email and I literally will add a screenshot of a video that they can click on. It's unlisted on YouTube or Vimeo and they can watch it. I'm speaking to them.
Sheesh, that's fire. That's fire.
So everything on the front end is customized. And then once I do the discovery call, and if I have to send a proposal to them, and I typically will send a proposal if the scope and the overall shoot needs a little bit more thought into figuring out what the budget is. So those are typically like the bigger budget projects with more people involved. And those proposals are customized, but I use the same Keynote template every time, super streamlined. And then my production guide. Depending on how big the shoot is, the talent, the hair and makeup, assistant producers, if I have a photography assistant, if there's going to be a lighting guy, sound guy, whatever, everyone's getting the production guide. And there's different versions depending on, you know, the people that are involved. Like hair and makeup doesn't need to know the stuff that, you know, like they don't need to know all the details.
Yeah, for sure.
But I don't know. I just think over time it's gotten better and better. And there's websites out there now where you can purchase templates. Like, I just want to shout out one, and I'm not even sponsored by them. Studio Standard does a really good job with these like super clean and minimal presentations, and they work with Canva and InDesign. So check that out.
Yeah.
But maybe me and Ed will like do a post around the time that we launch this episode, just showing you guys maybe some of our proposal or production guide stuff. And just how we keep it super simple, super clean, and right to the point. And when we send it off to those clients, we're typically sending it in an email, keeping it short and sweet, attached as the PDF, check it out, and it makes a difference. Really does.
No lengthy emails. That's one thing.
Hey, no one likes emails.
No one
So
likes
get
lengthy
creative.
emails,
Get creative
dude.
with the subject lines. And also, I always think of this analogy where if you're going to a birthday party and you're like, yo, I'm going to stop by Target real quick. I'm going to pick them up something, right? You have the person that's going to show up with with the gift without it being in a bag, right? With like tissue paper, with no birthday card. It's literally going to be the receipt and the product in their hand. And they'd be like, yo, bro, happy birthday. Then you're going to have the person that goes above and beyond and is like, no, we're going to wrap this thing up nice. We're going to put a bow on top. We're going to do the card and we're going to fill out the card so it doesn't just have like the Hallmark copy. It's going to be personalized. That person's going to win every time because it's more memorable, right? So I think my encouragement to anyone that's like been getting ghosted and lacks presentation, even look at your website, look at your whole business and your whole process with onboarding and just working with clients and spend more time on that. Because I guarantee you that by tweaking that, you're going to find that these clients are going to refer you to more business. You're going to get better testimonials and you're going to be able to turn these clients into repeat long-term content partners of yours. So yeah, I'll go off about presentation all day. And I do think that it has helped, Ed, that, like I said earlier, we've rubbed shoulders with graphic designers and me and you are just super interested in everything design. But I think those three things that we touched on today all contribute to what we talked about off the mic. And it's having a solid process, right?
I think, well, you need to have all the things we talked about today help with the onboarding process, like Paul just mentioned. And you need to have it like the DMs, right? DMs, pricing, presentation. Those are like the three kind of categories that Paul and I wanted to discuss today on this episode. I just wanted to mention something real quick from what Paul was talking about before about his production guides and just overall his flow for presentations, because sometimes it's not always from you to brand. You know, having a good presentation makes a good impression on other creators that you also work with, which in turn could lead to you being brought on for a project or them referring you to a different brand that maybe they just can't take on or it's out of scope for them. Because I remember when Paul brought me on for a shoot, I think it was like earlier this year or a while back, he handed me one of these production guides that he's talking about on this podcast. And I was like, yo, like this is sick, because it's not something we all have been to shoots where you show up, you got no direction from the director, you got no direction from the brand, and you're like, have your camera and you're holding it, you're in the middle of the talent and they're like, all right, start. And you're like, dude, I don't even know what I'm shooting yet today.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me. I don't know. I feel like everyone can relate to that.
That's relatable.
But if you can make sure that that doesn't happen with your presentation, like, or production guides or things that can help make the process smoother, and like I said earlier, make the process more immersive or make the client or the people you're working with feel like it was a memorable experience. That's what will bring them around time and time again, or that's what will turn them into a retainer client. It's so funny that you mentioned that the brand guide, it's something that has to be made where even they're like, oh, this is something that we would make in-house. I just was thinking, like, how awkward is it when you create a pitch deck that's so fire that they, like the CEO or founder is looking at their in-house graphic designer like, yo, you need to up your game.
Totally.
A creative just sent us a pitch deck that's better than our own brand guide. That's an awkward conversation to have in a stand-up on a Monday meeting.
I would hate to be on that design team or even the social media manager when that thing comes through. Because also like PowerPoint's great because that's like good for collaborative projects with, I've been a part of projects before where like me and Ed are on it. We'll do PowerPoint. We'll get it to a point where we just need to polish it up, and then we'll reformat it. But I think overall you got to have an onboarding process. I wouldn't say it needs to be rinse and repeat, but look at your business in a way where it's like if you brought on team members or you brought on people to like scale your business 3 years from now, how can you develop like a pretty streamlined process now, keeping in mind all the things we talked about, from the DM to talking about pricing to the way you present yourself, where you could almost teach those SOPs to them or standard operating procedures. So then from there you can scale. I think that's valuable. And I don't think it's something you need to figure out overnight, but also get your reps in and just know that the only way you're going to stand out is if you go the extra mile. Otherwise, you're going to get ghosted.
Ooh, mic drop moment there.
Yeah. Yep. I said it.
No, for real though. We should probably wrap up this episode now. I think we covered a good amount of information that people can brew on. But yeah, we just don't like seeing you guys get ghosted, me and Paul. We try to help creatives, as you guys know, on this podcast, and we want to help you guys make money. We want to help you guys land these gigs, and getting ghosted is something that happens to everyone. It's happened to Paul. It's happened to me. And so hopefully you guys found some value in this episode. This is where we do the outro.
Yo, and if you've been following or listening to the MIDCONVO podcast for quite some time, we just ask that you would give us a 5-star, even a review, or shoot us a message on Instagram in the DMs and tell us, what you thought about this episode. If you want to go the extra mile, shoot us a personalized little voice memo or a personalized video. And I'll make sure that myself or Ed respond to your DMs. But yeah, thanks for following, and continue to give us those 5 stars because we're trying to get to the top. Shout out to Ed for coming back from London with the fire. Let's get it.
Let's go. Peace.